Nikki doesn't have to be writing. There you go. The recording's there. So I think we've just got to let read in, Iriana. And we are all set to go. This is going to be, I love open cafes because you don't know what the subjects are going to be. So I'm looking forward to seeing everybody's tea and coffee. Who's got tea? Stevie, you just had a cup of coffee or tea there, did you?
It's coffee, Jenny.
It's coffee. Nikki's got coffee. Suzanne, have you got anything there?
I'm afraid I drank it already. So yeah, a bit disorganized, really.
Well, my disorganization is actually, I'm capitalizing on the fact my mum's been up recently and she left me with some home baking. And if Rennie was here, I'd be showing off the fact I've got homemade custard creams and things. But Rennie's not here, so I'll have to take her a photograph. So I've gazumped her for the first time in a long time. Anyway, morning. I know we've got a few new faces. So for those of you that haven't met me before, I'm Jenny. I'm the founder of SRITC and your host for today. Those of you that know what you're doing, you can crack on, but just stay mute at the moment, please. The format of this is I will do a bit of introduction. I will give you some high-level pieces in the Rural and Island Mobility Plan, bits of news, and then I'm going to stop talking. And I'm going to let you all chat and bring issues up or share things that you want to share. As usual, can you use the chat box just to introduce yourself, say who you are, where you are, if you want to do a weather report, because we usually do a weather report. I have to say, I don't know if Peter's here yet, but he's probably our most southern person today. We usually have somebody, 3 or 4 people from overseas, but we don't have anybody today. I think probably the end of financial year is getting to everybody. So without further ado, I will have my cake and coffee. Well, I'll drink my coffee, but I'll have my cake when I pass over to you all. So good morning. I am actually going to do my usual of picking on 1 or 2 people, okay? Instead of me explaining what SRITC means to me, I'm going to ask you what you think it means to you. And because this person has landed in my inbox twice recently, Jane, I'm going to ask Jane what Jane Young, that's you, yes, if she can unmute herself and ask, yeah, she's shaking her head going, why me? I'm going to ask her what SRITC means to her because she wants to join some of our focus groups as well. So Jane, do you want to unmute and explain what SRITC means to you? Have you found the unmute button yet? Can I do that?
Yeah, it.
Yeah,
can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go for it.
Yes. Well, it doesn't. What it means to me is that I'm not alone in the things that I believe in, and that this is the only place I can make the people who understand my vision. And that's really all I'm saying.
Very eloquently put. Thank you. I'm going to choose somebody who's done 1 or 2 cafes now. Nikki Budge, on high. We'll go north. Do you want to explain?
Oh, no.
You, because you yourself have put your hand up to be on some focus groups as well.
I did, yeah. As you've said, this is my second cafe now. So for me, the SRITC is has in a very short space of time become invaluable. A group of people who understand the issues and difficulties we're dealing with and can assist with constructive and helpful responses, which is absolutely amazing. So thank you to everybody.
And thank you, Nikki, for joining us in Hoy. I'm not sure if we want to have a competition between Hoy and Rabina here as to who's the furthest north today. Do you want to have a competition? Because my geography at the moment, probably, I don't know where you're both sitting.
I think I'm the furthest north, yeah.
I'm just making sure you're at home, Rabina. And you're not sitting somewhere else. So yeah, for those of you not familiar, that's what we're about. And I welcome the new faces to today's open cafe. So lovely to see you all. So just remember next time it might be you that gets selected. So as you know, we've got the cafes. We've also, because it's landing in your inbox, got the online gathering that's taking place in not so distant future. And I'll touch also on things like social value and transportation pieces shortly. We've got 1 question mark on this page here because this only came to light yesterday, so I don't have a picture, but I'm going to ask Doug Blackie to just unmute himself and say hello because he's kindly put his hand up to help with some in the background as a volunteer with the online gathering. So Doug, do you want to just introduce yourself so that people know who you are when they get an email from you?
Great. Okay. Well, hi everybody. Yeah, Doug Blackie. I put a little thing in the chat, but I live in Nairn and I'm a rural healthcare consultant. And you might tell that I'm actually from Canada originally, but living in Scotland now and reaching out to and being involved with SRITC. And I just got off a call with Scottish Rural Action as well. So I'm working sort of across a lot of the rural networks, which is exciting. And yeah, as Jenny said, happy to sort of lend a hand as where I can with the upcoming gatherings. I think they're gonna, yeah, it's gonna be a really exciting opportunity to bring people together. But yeah, that's about a bit about me, and happy to get to know people over the next few weeks as we get working on this stuff.
Thanks, Doug. Really appreciate it. So I'm going to quickly fly into the Rural and Island Mobility Plan, which I'm hoping many of you have either downloaded or had a quick squint through, and I thank those that have given us feedback. We had originally thought about putting workshops together for this, but we went with the let's put it far and wide as a consultation, and we've had some really, really useful pieces come back to us. Now, Iriana's putting some polls up. I know they can be the bane of your life, but please do fill them in because it helps us when we're trying to do evaluation and report back to the funders that we've got. So if you can just quickly squiz that on so it then disappears from our screen, that would be great. So I can't really remember where I got this quote from. So for those of you that don't know, I'm dealing with post-concussion syndrome, so I'm having some memory issues. But this is something that someone wrote down, or I wrote down when I listened to them, that rural mobility is not something that is delivered, but spoken as a challenge that needs solving. And I thought, you know what, that's just so right. It's always about how do we solve rural mobility rather than actually let's just get on with delivering it, which seems to be very much the mindset in more densely populated areas. So I just wanted to share that phrase because it really resonated with me. So just a bit of recap that sort of falls out of what we've done with the Rural and Island Mobility Plan is that we've discussed and discovered through the last 6 months, 12 months, and also through the cafes, that there's a big desire for pulling together to help on certain topics. Now, we've already got the car club, which also involves car sharing. And yes, Rachel, I will come to you shortly. And that's been really successful. So we've had a great amount of interest about ferries, and obviously at the top of the show you heard Sheila talking about ferries. So we're putting together a focus group on water transport, so that's not just ferries, it's also about estuaries, etc. Tourism and visitors have become a key people person within transport as well, as Doug has already alluded to, health, and we had Stevie who's here today at the last cafe. So if you want to be in those focus groups, there's nothing onerous. It's about making change happen and working together on these subjects. And can you put it into the chat and Nikki will pick up with you. The idea is that we have a meeting at the end of April, beginning of May for each group, and that group then decides what their priorities are and where and what happens. As I mentioned, the visitor levy consultation, you'll have seen it in the news bulletins, and I'm going to actually hand over to Sheila Gilmore on this. Many people will be looking, oh, visitor levy doesn't apply to me, but it applies to all of you if you're going to be travelling throughout Scotland, but it also applies to you if you want an exclusion because you happen to be going from Orkney, for example, down to Aberdeen for hospital purposes, or a ferry is disrupted. Transport is a very big piece under visitors. So Sheila.
Hi, yes. So I sit in the Scottish Tourism Alliance, the strategy group for the visitor tourism levy. And of course, the issue with this is that it's different across all the authorities. It's been left to each authority to determine exactly how it's done. From the business point of view, the businesses are not very happy about it. It's all round accommodation providers. Obviously, from the council's point of view, it can give them additional income. And it's been looked at a percentage basis. That's not what was proposed, I might add. It was supposed to be a flat rate, but they've made it a bit more complicated for those people that are visitors and people that are not visitors, as Jenny has alluded to, because everybody will have to pay the visitor levy. And if you're travelling, say, for hospital appointments or community groups, or travelling for any other purpose, kids, people going to play football, whatever it may be, and you have to stay overnight, then you will be treated as a tourist, and you'll be expected to pay that tourism tax. There will be exemptions, but you will have to claim that back. And that process hasn't actually sorted itself out yet. Our situation here in an island, obviously, people could get stranded because of weather or technical issues, and then have to pay money out for, you know, not any fault of their own. And there should be exemptions for all that sort of thing too. However, it's been left a little bit woolly, that's not even a word, but it's been left, it's a very grey area. Each local authority is looking at it differently. It's really been pushed through by Edinburgh City Council, I have to say, because they were adamant that they had to have this tourism visitor levy. The ironic thing is that it's all to come back. There has to be an agreement with the community where that money is spent. So, like, if you asked our community where they think the money's spent, we would need money spent in the roads. Well, which 500-metre stretch of road are you going to spend it on, kind of thing. But also you have to bear in mind that a lot of the services that are not relating to tourism, you know, log lorries are going to be using these roads and things as well. So we have to make sure there's an opportunity there to do something in terms of community transport potentially, if they engage with the right people. And that's where the problem lies, because it's up to every individual authority in Scotland how they will deliver that. So Argyll and Bute have already commenced their consultation. It's not going very well. So too have Highland Council. It's not going very well. Edinburgh are further down the line. They've been working on this, they maintain, for about 8 years. But there's an 18-month lead-in. The Scottish Government have said to local authorities there has to be an 18-month lead-in. So that in turn means then if they're putting stuff through just now, then it can't actually start until 2026, March 2026, because they've been working on it for the past few months. Our council, North Ayrshire Council, in fact, all the Ayrshire councils haven't done anything about it at all. I would like to say they've not done anything about it at all because they don't know if they want to do it, but they've really not done anything about it at all. And my apologies if there's anybody here from any of the 3 Ayrshires, but my take on that would be just because they just haven't done anything about it. It's been in the back burner, so to speak. And that's maybe not a bad thing, because I think then they'll look and they'll learn from the mistakes other authorities are rushing into this. Because I think some of them are thinking, oh, that'll be extra money for us, but it's not money for them. The money is supposed to go back into tourism infrastructure, which we as community should all benefit from. So transport's a big thing.
So this links into our focus group as well, because many of the local authorities haven't worked out what they're going to spend the money on. And it would be a lovely position for SRITC to feed back into these consultations to say, well, X percentage could be ring fenced for transport in rural areas and rural communities. So you may think it's a bit of a left field piece, but it's actually not. It's very relevant. Okay. The next one is, I will share in the next news bulletin, one of our community members over in Finland has just published a really insightful 30-page document on rural energy and transport poverty, just tying the two together. And for those of you that know me with my PhD hat on, I talk about something called a double energy vulnerability, where we're talking about this decarbonisation perspective, and that's the energy line, but you've also got the transport, and there's a point in the middle where the two meet, and it's really important when we're talking about this in a rural context. The other thing is just to let you know, if anybody's seen this on the go, that there's the Win-Win for Work Life project, which is a European Union project. I was asked to be on the stakeholder panel group for this because it's about how remote working is reshaping our urban and rural areas. So if anybody's got any comments or thoughts about all of that, then let me know and I can feed that into that project. So yeah, good to be involved in there. The last one before I do RIMP is actually to do with rail. One of our community members is also working with Joe Randall, who some of you may know as well, who's the head strategy at the Railway Innovation Group. Anyway, long story short, there was a parliamentary group meeting about a week ago, and what they want to be able to do is put together, put together a group of people and group of stakeholders to really help push the case for a joined up transportation, as in rail, services from the Highland Main Line all the way down to the north of England and the East Midlands. So if there's anybody here with a strong interest in John Carr. Yes, I have asked John Yellowlees. If there's a strong interest and strong passion to be involved in this that has more expertise, then that would be really appreciated. Again, just put it into the chat, and I can also give you more information about it. So all that links into the RIMP. Okay, so just a bit of a reminder here. The first report we had was testing a framework from the Mass Scotland conference last year, and that was report number 1. Then we went on and we did the domestic piece, okay, looking at it and looking at the differences that existed, and particularly in language and policy commitments, both at community level and all the way up. And then more recently, we've shared some examples of what's happening internationally, whether it's in Cyprus on an island and how they're doing sustainable island plans, or whether it's from particular areas in America. So that's the chronological at the moment, and we will be producing a final round 1 output in the near future that you'll be able to read, and it will also be feeding into the Scottish Government Rural Delivery Plan. Okay, so and there'll be recommendations, and there will be some strong messaging to go through and forward. But what I wanted to do just for 5 minutes was actually share something that came in from Scottish Government on the back of reading all these reports. I'm not going to say who wrote this, but they said, I'm really pleased to see the data metrics being involved in the key recommendations. However, they, as in Scottish Government, are struggling with the most suitable data indicators that they want to include in the Rural Delivery Plan and in the Rural Scotland Data Dashboard. So we're really helping them at the moment with what we've been producing within the RIMP, okay? Now, as normal, this is a closed shop and it's Chatham House rules, so please do not take this away and repeat it to anybody else. This is for your eyes only at the moment. So could you please tell me, just now, I'll leave these on the screen, okay, do you think that these are the right data points for transport and rural transport within the Rural Delivery Plan coming forward? Okay, so I'll give you a minute or two. So how adults usually travel to work or education, how satisfied the quality of public transport is, what proportion of primary schools are delivering on-road cycling training, how many households have access to a bike, the number of disability accessible or low floor buses, passenger journeys and local bus services, local authority road network conditions, local bus fare, EV infrastructure, and ferry reliability. Now, what I've put down next is, to me, what gaps are there, but also, are these the right ones that we want to be thinking about? Just unmute yourself, it's easier because I'm sharing a screen, I can't see that people easily. So, Sheila.
Jenny, should we also have something in there about, I know we've got local authority road network conditions, should we also have something in there about sort of off-road routes for cycling in rural areas?
You meaning forestry tracks? Or
well, just not necessarily forestry tracks. I just think, you know, in a lot of route, like where we live, I mean, I wouldn't want my 8-year-old granddaughter to be cycling in Shiskin, but she can cycle in Brodie because she cycles around the pavements and things. But there is, you know, there's no alternative. We're not encouraging young people to actually be active and use active travel in a lot of rural areas because, and it's not necessarily local authority road networks, it's actually just safe cycle paths, isn't it? And walking paths, because a lot of people don't want to walk in the roads for the same reason.
So I can't keep it, my brain because of post-concussion can't juggle the chat and everything else. So I'm just gonna ask Suzanne, are you there? How would you phrase that? Wearing your cycling hat or helmet, as the pun may be.
Thanks, Jenny. I think someone else, Abigail, has sort of put the question in the chat about, are we talking about transport or are we talking about leisure? So I would perhaps have more of an outcomes focused look at it rather than measuring lengths of routes or things like that. I'd be looking for an indicator that tells me about what actually happens. So could we use the hands up survey in primary schools to find out who cycles to school or who cycles other journeys and who walks to school? Because delivering training doesn't mean that anyone cycles, and having routes doesn't mean anyone uses them. So I would be looking for an indicator that tells us what is actually happening.
Okay, Nikki's taking notes at the moment. We might come back to both of you just to make sure we get the right phraseology to put it to SG. Abby, do you want to say anything on that? Why you put something in the chat? Do you want to add anything to it?
I was just confirming that, yeah, I'm assuming that she meant for transport rather than necessarily like forestry routes or something.
I think,
yeah, to actually facilitate cycling as a transport option rather than cycling for leisure.
I think the other gap that's been, I've just seen it in the chat, the other gap that's not there is walking. So we need to obviously have some, as you want to use outcome indicators, the phraseology or whatever, for walking, because that doesn't appear, and neither does rail was my obvious one, and I think somebody else has picked that up. There's nothing there to do with rail. Who's got their hands up here first? I think Jane, you had your hand up. Did you have your hand up, Jane? No, who's got their hand up? Somebody just unmute themselves, please.
I've got my hand up, Jenny. Rabina, I just wondered if, because we've mentioned in here travel to work education and also like children in schools, but I'm just wondering about healthcare. Nothing really in there about healthcare, and we had that whole thing in the last cafe about access to healthcare. Was it the last cafe? What was it? Anyway, yeah. So something about that. I don't know what it would be, but I think it needs to be in there.
Yep. Okay, we'll get that one added. John, you need to unmute, John. Unmute.
Sorry, I was just about to make exactly the same point as Irina's just made.
Great minds think alike. Right, okay. Anybody else? Ed, you put something down as well, haven't you?
Hi, Jenny, it's Doug here. One, I for the life of me cannot find the hand raise option on my Zoom. I don't know where it went. It's the weirdest thing. But anyway, I just wanted to jump in with a couple of ideas, but I'm not 100% how to measure them. But one is the concept of transport poverty. And this is where we assume that people living in remote or island communities have access to a vehicle if they're not on a public transport grid with a train or bus. So there's that idea, right? That you know our people suffering sort of transport poverty. The others, because I have a health background, I was thinking about, and these need to be explored a bit more, but it's this idea of being able to look at health transport statistics, right? And how many ambulance trips, how many air ambulance trips, and looking at that ratio, because sometimes that can give you an indication of how unreliable the roads are if they have more air ambulance trips per capita than other parts of the country. And then also road traffic accidents per square or per capita can also be indicative of the road types and conditions. So those are just some ideas. And one day I'll figure out where the hand raise is. And I'm sorry, John, I may have interrupted.
Put it in the chat for you. For me, the bit, and I'll come to, I think, John, your hand's still raised. I don't know if you want to speak again, but for me, the bit about the transport poverty is so true. And what I was more thinking about, what's missing is in the gaps, is in they need to have some output of where bus networks aren't and bus services aren't. And so, for example, where I am, I have no bus. I have taxi would cost a fortune. No safe off-road cycling because the traffic's 60 miles an hour. I've got a husband who's had an operation who can't drive. So today, so I could be here with you, I've got a son with long COVID. I've had to beg a neighbour to get the son to school because there was no other method of him to actually get to school. And I was like looking at this, going, where does the data outputs for this capture the people that don't have, and I'm lucky to have a car, but I couldn't use it obviously just now, don't have access to any of this. This seems to be more about capturing what's already in existence rather than what's missing, was my observation. John?
Again, I was about to make much the same point. It'd be very useful to actually contrast the accessibility in various types of areas. You know, I can imagine that in the Campsies, for example, you're not too far away from a reasonable bus network. but the situation in parts of Argyll or in the far north is very, very different. And it would be useful looking at the presentation of these data, how it varies from different type of area to different type of area. I think the other thing that I'm very conscious of in work I've been doing recently is a lot of people in well-paid jobs like to live in the countryside, but they don't join in as members of the rural community. You know, they will consume urban services whilst the local community may be bereft of that type of service. And I think that's another important area that policy has yet got to come up with an approach to measuring and, if necessary, dealing with.
So I'd agree with you on that one. And I think that's probably why I've been asked to sit on this EU stakeholder piece, because there is the white collar moving to the rural areas and not necessarily partaking. And I am not forgetting about Rachel Avery. We are coming to Rachel shortly. She will be sharing some insights, which I think are really relevant. Before I move on, is there anything else anybody wants to add into this mix that I can feed back to Scottish Government?
Yeah, Jenny, if I can jump in, I think just building on what John just said, I can't quite figure out if it's a question or a proposal, but like around the time it takes to get somewhere, or the what services are accessible to people, because that was the thing that came out of the health one. It's like it's just inaccessible services. I'm
So
trying to think of how
you
that
know,
helps you in this context, but
the Scottish Government's rural definitions, for those of you that don't know, are based upon somebody having a car, or I will say access to a car. So you're accessible if you have access to a car and you're an accessible rural and you can get to somewhere within 30 minutes, okay? I have said repeatedly through my PhD that's the wrong indicator. You shouldn't be relying on the use of a car to be measuring how accessible somewhere is. It should actually be mode of transport such as the bus, if it's going to be the backbone of what our sector is, but I seem to fall on deaf ears. So you could say that the rural definition maps that we've shared before, Stevie, are examples of where if you own a car, how accessible things are, but we probably need that using other modes of transport like rail and
yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
right. Okay. Moving on, before I completely shut up and leave you the floor so I can actually eat this custard cream and make a mess everywhere, so you're not all watching me do that. You've heard me talk about social value. There's some people here on the call today that are going to be involved in a social value project that will kick off towards the end of April. But we do produce reports and insights on projects and things like the Rural Island Mobility Plan, and as I'm showing here, about cafes. In our final report that we will be producing, we will give you some examples of how rural transport has been measured to look at all the other social impacts, rather than just saying here's £1 in and we're getting £1.10 back and we're getting 80p. So ones that have been fed in more recently is one that literally has just been published in Finland that we'll be adding in, and also one actually from 2020 in Minnesota, which I'm hoping to have at the online gathering to show you how other countries and areas have been trying to capture the uncatchable, as I will put it at the moment, or my other phrase I keep getting told is I should be writing something about is formalising the informal. So it's formalising the informal networks that are happening, the transportation that network transport that we're using, whether we're getting my neighbour to take my son to school today, for example. How do you actually put a value on my neighbour having a car? So the social value piece you will hear more and more of, and Nikki is the sort of champion along with me on that at the moment. The other thing, tying into our next cafe, which is our final cafe before the summer break, because we are not doing a cafe in May and June because of the online gathering. The work that we have contributed to on a project in the northeast of England about electric vehicles and infrastructure and business and tourism and local people, and a much wider broad spectrum will be taken to discuss EVs in rural areas. That is the next cafe. Okay, so you'll find out about that then. Then the last one is, it will have landed in your inbox. is the supporter packages, whether it's for the online gathering or for the larger community for SRITC. If you can please just share it around, whether it's in your inbox or on the socials, please, just to make awareness of what's available within SRITC. That would be great, because the small team that we are can't do it on their own. So that's my little plea for help. Okay, so just a reminder, and Ariana will put it in the chat for you, save your place and book in to the gathering Tuesday the 3rd of June to 10 o'clock till 12 o'clock, and then to accommodate time zones, which will have a bit more of an international flair, Thursday 5th of June will be 2 till 4. And aside from my introduction PowerPoint, there will be no PowerPoints. For those of you who remember the 22 pivot, that was all conversations and panel discussions and scavenger hunts and fun things. So that's what we'll be doing again. So that will be those dates, and hopefully they're in the chat for you. Now, I'm going to kick it off with putting Rachel on the spot. This is her first ever cafe. She's never been to any of them before, but I would like Rachel just to unmute herself, introduce herself, and explain what challenge and where her inspiration came from for something that she's working on. So I think many of you will love her story and also have some suggestions. So Rachel, no pressure, but hello and good morning.
Yeah, hello. I wasn't kind of expecting to speak, but hi everyone. I was recovering from a cold. So I'm not, yeah.
Fine, I've got a custard cream tea. Go for it.
But yeah, I live in Kingussie, so not so far from Jenny, and involved in a very small community group called Badenoch Climate Action, and we're trying to make little projects happen in lots of different spheres. We've got a repair cafe, and looking at setting up a sharing library, and looking at waste management and various things. But one of the things that I've been involved in setting up is a peer-to-peer car sharing group, although I didn't know that's what it was called until I spoke to Jenny about it. But basically, our community is on the mainline train, which is fantastic. But there's a lot of folk. We have sort of regular-ish buses that go some places, but there's lots of people that are like, my household is a one-car household. Both me and my husband work, and we juggle who gets to use the car, and sometimes that's a total pain in the arse. There's other households that are one car, but just sort of holding on, trying not to buy a second car. And then there's also loads of cars that are really underutilized in our community. So we've got neighbours, for example, who both work from home like 98% of the time, but have 2 cars sitting in their driveway. And sometimes they have to like drive one around a bit just to keep it in use, sort of thing. So the idea is there's no official car club, there's no car hire place anywhere nearby that is convenient. And so we're trying to set up a really kind of slightly formalizing, I guess, the informal thing that Jenny was speaking about, trying to put people who occasionally need to use a car, mainly for work or for other things, with people who have additional car resource parked in our community. So we're piloting it in Kingussie. So the idea is that you could like walk and pick up the car, and trying to work out some kind of ground rules and best way of doing that, I guess.
She let me eat my custard cream, so that's a bonus. But I'm going to ask Rachel for her inspiration for where this came from. Tell your New Year story briefly.
So I mentioned to Jenny that so we were going on holiday to Mull for a week over Hogmanay. We go every year. We packed our car full of stuff for a week, and loads of games for activities and all that kind of stuff. So fully laden car, and it was like, I don't know if you remember, well, the weather was absolutely dreadful in between Christmas and New Year by us, and but we got like an hour and a half into the journey and broke down on a very wiggly, horrible bit of road by Loch Lagan, and ended up getting towed back to home, but had no way of getting a working car until like the week after New Year, because everything was shut over New Year. And I put a little thing on Facebook saying, we're trying to go on holiday, and would we be able to borrow a car from anybody? And put that on Facebook, and so just shown by the Facebook friends. But in Canusi, certainly Facebook is used as a way of kind of connecting with people locally. So there's lots of folk that are neighbours and folk that really don't know very well, but who I'm connected to on Facebook. And I had 8 offers of someone loaning me their car within about 20 minutes of having did that, including people I really didn't know very well at all. And that was definitely because of the timing, in that, you know, lots of people have 2 cars for work, and they weren't working because it was the week over Hogmanay and that kind of thing. But I was just quite inspired by the fact that there were seven people I really didn't know very well, who lived within a few roads radius of me where I live, who was up for loaning me a car for a week to drive to so we could go on holiday. So yeah, how interesting, Jane. 5 or more cars parked outside. Crazy. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, I could like talk for longer, but one of the things that I'm interested in is we've got 7 or 8 folk connected in an email group just now. And one of the things, there's differences between the people. There's some folk who, you know, if you borrowed their car, and we have borrowed their car, and, you know, if I give them a, you know, a nice block of chocolate or something, some fancy chocolate, or a bottle of wine, that would be a really lovely way of saying thank you. But there's others for whom actually getting some money would be really helpful in keeping that second car on the road and paying for MOT and that kind of thing. The way that we've organised it so far is that it's a purely private arrangement based on trust between the 2 people, the people who have the car and the people that are borrowing the car. So like the group or Bednar Climate Action have no responsibilities. It's responsibility of the people who borrow the car to ensure that they are insured on the car, so that the folk that own the car are happy with that, and the person who owns the car is responsible for ensuring that it's, like, you know, safe and roadworthy to drive and that. But yeah. Oh, that's interesting, Sheila. Yeah, but one of the things that I'm interested in is I want to try and kind of create or get a bit of an idea of, if people want to contribute financially to borrowing a car, what might be a sort of a fairish thing to say, you know, whereas we're saying that if people want to organise, aren't insured to drive any car, and they want to do it third party, fully comprehensive insurance, that they use cover.com, the app, but they've just put their prices up quite a lot. So you might be, you know, spending 40 or 50 quid on insurance to borrow the car for a day, and then what is a, you know, sensible, either as a time amount or mileage, if we're saying that you return the car with the amount of fuel that you borrowed it in. So if it was full, then you return it full. But yeah, any kind of experiences that folk have in supporting that peer-to-peer car sharing, I'd love to hear.
Sorry, Rachel, I disappeared. I had a momentary power cut, so I'm now back again.
Oh, you're back. I was
So
just
I'm back.
like bootling along, saying stuff that may or may not.
I find your story inspirational, the fact that you actually had this issue and you want to make a change happen in the community. And I think that's what we all end up doing, is having an experience and trying to find a solution. So does anybody have any questions, any thoughts, any signposting, whatever, to help Rachel out? Or just even a, yay, love your idea? Everybody's gone silent, so I'm going to take the fact that as a unanimous, they love your idea and they just don't want to contribute to it, Rachel. They're nodding. They're nodding. Jane, how many houses have 5 cars sitting on them?
What happens is this, that people have large families, and as they grow up and they leave school, they have to find work nearby, and nearby for us can be up to 50 miles away. And when they get to work, somehow they've got to find the money to buy a car. So I was just thinking of one particular family, but I know they're not alone. There are loads of houses around here, and it just makes me think of the government was trying to reduce car use at one stage. I think maybe they've forgotten all about that at the moment. But how this could possibly be achieved if all the cars were electric. So we haven't been able to use EVs here very much at all, despite everyone doing their best.
Do you want to explain where you are, Jane, geography-wise, because not everybody will know where you are.
Well, I'm in Loch Inver, which is about 40 miles north of Ullapool, and we have 3 EV chargers, one of which belongs to our group, our community group, and it's very difficult to get access to those, and we need it because we have one entirely electric bus, which we haven't been able to use it out with the parish because we have to go over mountain passes to get out of the parish, and we're carrying a lot of older, vulnerable people. So we need to put the heater on. So we can't actually use it anywhere else. So that's what we're using it for within the parish, which is huge, actually. So
yeah, massive.
Mm-hmm.
I see Rachel just put a question in the chat. Rachel, I know Ed's also asked, saying curious to see how it's going to work in practice. Could you just share briefly what the plan is at the moment for the idea?
Well, so it's sort of it's working in practice. I've yet to kind of publicize it more widely, but we've got 8 people on an email group, a Google group we set out as well. That my initial idea had been WhatsApp, but there's someone on the group who doesn't have the older person doesn't have a smartphone. Yeah, so I guess the idea is that this is an email group of people. In terms of insurance and loaning your vehicle, I don't think there is. I don't think. So there's some people who are insured to drive any vehicle, and for others, it's they'll arrange cover. But to the best of my knowledge, it doesn't affect like the person who owns the car's insurance, unless it's being used a huge lot more in terms of mileage, maybe than they're insured.
What type of trips are they doing? Is it going to make more? What sort of trips is it they're looking to use the vehicle for?
Yeah, so I think it's for work. That's certainly why I need it. Although there's a guy who's got like a really old roughy-tufty little kind of Kangoo thing that he was like, no one's going to borrow my car and it's not really suitable for long distance journeying. But if you wanted to take borrow a car to take a load to the dump, it's brilliant. So there's a range of cars on just now, but the idea is we've got really, really super simple group rules about like, if how it would work, and would work if you wanted to borrow someone's car, but it's a private arrangement between those 2 individuals, and all it is a group email, so you can say, I need to borrow a car next Tuesday to, for in my case, take a whole load of forest school stuff to Aviemore and then bring it back again. Can I borrow anyone's car then? And then make that private arrangement.
So when Rachel and I spoke about it, it was about keeping it small to begin with, to get the traction, to see what works and doesn't work, isn't it, Rachel? Because it was a case of not trying to go too big and cover a big area and lots of people. And you had looked into different insurance models that were out there as well, hadn't you?
Yeah. That's interesting. So 45p seems to be kind of quite standard, but I think that generally includes fuel. But yeah, this idea of there's some different cars for different kinds of trips. But yes, it's very
I'm just wondering if this is something, Nikki, up in Hoy, that you do informally already, and is it formalising the informal, or is it something that you haven't needed to explore yet?
No, we don't do anything like this, but I just filled in the questionnaire, and I put that I'm really interested in Rachel's problem solving here and what she's creating, because that is something that potentially could benefit, particularly a rural area like ours, where there are lots of as somebody else said, lots of families that have got lots of cars that are all sat there because all the children are home. And then on the other side of the road, there are families that I know haven't got a vehicle at all. So I'm very interested listening to Rachel speak about this.
So interestingly enough, on the car club piece, because I was explaining to Rachel, first used the word for car club, didn't you, Rachel? I was like, oh, don't use that word, don't use that word. But you looking at the car club piece where there's an actual vehicle in the community, which has been the challenge for a number of communities that have received funding, because they then can't get insurance, because you can't get insurance if you're 1 or 2 vehicles in a community. We have an insurance broker that's a friend of SRITC. So if anybody sends me an insurance question, that goes to them. And they are the ones that have been helping the Community Transport Association as well. And anybody that has 3 cars and more can get car insurance. So one of the challenges we've got is there an option to create a body, in inverted commas, that could then take on all these different places that have 1 or 2 car clubs and make it under one umbrella to be able to get a better insurance piece. But to create that body requires somebody to take that responsibility on, and there's quite a big piece there. But that's more of a longer term solution. But the here and now was one of them got money from the Just Transition Fund, and I turned around to them and said, actually, instead of going for a car, why not go for a small minibus? Because then you can get that insured, because insuring a minibus is much easier than a car in a car club. Well, they've actually, one of the other groups then said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to use the money for an electric tractor for their local community for doing the football pitches and so forth and so on in their area. But the other solution was what I put to Rachel, which is that you actually do the peer-to-peer car sharing, because it's actually, you're utilising a car rather than actually trying to purchase a car to put it in to insure it. You're using the cars that are already there. So it's been really nice to see what Rachel's been doing and how she's going through this learning curve. And if I can persuade her, I would love her to share where she's got to on the online gathering, because I think it's something that resonates with everybody. And I know Ed, I'll pull you in, is interested in this because they had Murray Car Share, and that's now dissolved partly because of the car club insurance issue. So Ed, what tickles your fancy about and I mean that in a nice way, not a dodgy way, what tickles your fancy about Rachel's project?
Sounds like a great concept, and it's fantastic to hear it's working. I suppose my mind goes to all of the potential challenges. What's happened in lieu of Murray Car Share closing is quite a lot of people have bought a lead person has bought a vehicle, and then you can have up to 5 named drivers on that vehicle. So people have sort of self-organized themselves into these little clusters of 5. So that seems to be filling a bit of a gap, but of course it's not as flexible or as good as a formalized car club, because it's just less flexibility in that. But it seems to be working.
Again,
yeah, just there's just because somebody mentioned there's 5 cars. There's 2 houses next to each other near where I live, and I haven't actually counted them, but there must be about 7 cars, and 7 cars between the 2 houses, and they're all white BMWs, so it looks like a BMW show garage. It's quite funny when you walk past.
Right, so thank you, Rachel. You've inspired people. Sorry, people, the polls are coming back up again as well. I've got a feeling, Rachel, if you share your email address, if you're happy to do that in the chat, some people might come back to you with bits and pieces. I won't share it amongst anybody else that's not in this group, but anybody else got something burning that they want to bring up before I pick on somebody? Everybody stays really quiet. I'm going to ask Jill Davies if she's there, please. I know she's not got her camera on at the moment, but Jill, are you there? Yay, you're there. She says,
I am, yes.
hello.
I'm in the centre of Blairgowrie, and we have really rubbish internet, and that's why I put my camera off.
It's all right. It's all right. But you've got the Bahamas behind you, so that's even
Yes, yeah, it's bright and breezy today.
yeah. I was really curious with what your role is and what you're involved with. So do you want to explain why you're here and what hats you wear?
So back in 2017 to 19, I was a community development worker on a project up in Aberfeldy and Kinlochranach, very rural area. And we did a consultation, and one of the things that we found was care and transport were two big barriers to living in rural areas. Found was I'll just do that wee thing.
Multitasking, isn't it?
What we found was that there was a public service bus there, and it has a fantastic route, and it ran 3 or 4 days a week. And when I started there was only 6 people on it, and I did a consultation, and the Perth and Kinross Council, they did a consultation with the users. And we found with the community consultation, no one knew that that bus was actually a public service bus. They thought it was the works bus for Fisher's Laundry. It wasn't branded at all, and it just had a wee 91 in the front. So it was more about marketing and accessing the transport information, which was an issue. So I branded the bus and did a timetable. So it was having fun on the number 91. So there was all the different places that you could go. You could go to Kenmore, get off, feed the ducks, go for a cuppa with your friends, have lunch. You could go to galleries, castles. You could go up to Fortingall as a tourist. So I distributed all the bus timetables, and then I also handed it to this tourist information boards, and they were ecstatic that there was this new tourists service. And I said, no, it's the public service bus. So that was in 2019. I finished that. I've kept in touch. They've extended it now to 5 days a week. So it's more useful for people using it for going to work. And they also did a consultation last year on would it be practical to have a bus depot in Aberfeldy, because the current service bus is based in Crieff, and they have to come across and then they do their reroute and things like that. So that has been really good, but it was very much about people not realizing that there were services there.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll give you a little anecdote. I got married in Strathtyne, so I know the area very well. And yeah, the visitor piece there, I know Jane's put it in the chat that the buses are also used quite often for the school runs in the morning and afternoon, which makes it more of a challenge, doesn't it?
Yes. We worked very much with the taxi service and community. And when you were talking about the group, so I set up a transport group when I was up there. It's just changed name. It's Tay Valley Transport Link or something like that now. But they actually took over the bank in the centre of town. So that's a visitor centre, and it's a transport link for information.
Wow.
So they've continued to develop it as well. When they set up their website, they had a national scheme which was about basically hiring the car on your neighbour's drive. But they've since remodeled their website, so they're not able to, they don't have that on. They had a car share scheme because people were coming from Killin and then coming all the way down round the Loch Tay through to Aberfeldy and then down towards Perth. So people were coming through, and they could go then on the national car share app, which was super.
I think this sounds like we're going to run out of time, Jill, I'm afraid.
All right, okay.
It sounds like we're going to have to do a Jill Davies.
Oh.
And unfortunately, Steve Cassidy, who was with us at the beginning, who lives in Rannoch, he's the local fireman, volunteer fireman. He's had a shout, so he's off. And I would have put you in touch. But it sounds like you've got a lot to give to a cafe. So I'm glad that you put your camera on and shared that. And don't disappear on us. We'll be in touch because I think everybody will want to know what you've been up to. Thank you. It's been really useful. So before everybody scarpers away, I'm just going to share 2 slides with you, and then we can all go and get our next meetings. People do email me, like Doug, and say, how can we help? And I'll use Tesco's phrase of every little helps. So if anybody has 1 hour or so that they could do, then please let us know. We're obviously putting together the online gathering, so any help to just literally spread the word. If you can share the emails around, share it on socials, or if you want to be a bit more involved in the logistics, then just let us know. I think Jill might have just volunteered herself for being part of a cafe after the summer. So we're looking for ideas or case studies that you want to share or you know about, or subject matters. So again, pop us something through. We are also going to be running and sharing a session at the Mass Mobility as a Service Scotland conference, and that we're going to be talking about social value and how to evaluate transportation, and whether we can't do it or whether we can do it. So if you wish to be involved in that or even attend, and we are also going to be at the Royal Highland Show, and we're looking for some volunteers to come along. We can give you a bit more scope about what we'll be doing, but we will be hopefully launching the Rural and Island Mobility Plan, and the Thursday, Friday gives us access to MSPs and policymakers, etc. So if you have any inclination at all, please drop me an email on that. As I say, if you can even just share around the supporter package, that would be really welcomed. And you will be ingrained now with the dates for the online gathering. So Nikki has been putting a survey in, which again, obviously we use to help us apply for funding and to be able to feed back to funders. So please just do take those 2 minutes just now to fill in that survey. Otherwise, I will be sending a following up NAG one, which I don't like doing because we all get enough emails as it is. A reminder, and Iriana's probably put in the chat, that the next cafe is about EVs and decarbonisation, and then that will be it until we reconvene either August or September because of the online gathering. So that is it. Please do take that time to fill in that survey, and thank you for joining our online cafe. And if anybody else has got anything burning to say, you've got 35 seconds. Nobody's got anything burning to say, so I'll take that as a good sign. Thank you very much, people, for your contribution. And if I don't speak to you beforehand, see you in April and at the online gathering. Thank you, folks. Thanks, Rachel.
Jenny.
Thanks.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye. Have a good weekend, Rabina. You all right, Jane? Right. I think Rabina's frozen. There we go.
That's it.
I think we covered a lot in there, haven't we?
Yeah, that was more than usual. And we had more people than we expected, 23.
Yeah, I was going to go who wants to be involved in the online gathering, but I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do the can you help us if you want to volunteer, put your hand up, blah, blah, blah. Nikki, probably a lot in there. I don't know if we're still...
Yeah, well, I'm just saving my transcript just now, so...
Do you want to stop the recording or is it stopped?
I think it stopped, hasn't it? Oh, no.